So you'll need your snips and you'll need your thread. This is very important. You want to make sure that when you measure out the amount of thread you're using, you want to hold the spool like this, and I'm pulling the thread down to about my elbow. Okay? Once you have the length of thread, it's about my elbow. Alright? I'm going to take twice that amount. So it's still only from my fingertips to my elbow. That's the amount of thread that I want. You do not want to cut a ton of thread. That will be aggravating for a couple of reasons, especially if you're learning how to sew. Handling a long length of thread is difficult. Also think about how long the reach of your arm is. If you have 3 feet of thread, you can't actually efficiently get that thread through the fabric properly. Additionally, the more thread you have, the greater possibility that your thread is going to not entangle. So by taking a manageable amount of thread will assist you in being able to sew efficiently and with less frustration. Next, I'm going to show you how to condition your thread. We have beeswax as the conditioner for our thread. There are artificial thread conditioners available on the market. Again, it comes down to personal preference. I'm going to take the beeswax. Now, I would like to just say that some people do like to condition their thread after they've threaded the needle. I prefer to do it prior to threading the needle because that way I don't leave a weak spot exposed that is unconditioned where the eye of the needle kind of hides that little bit of thread. So I do like to condition it prior to putting it in the needle, but if you are comfortable conditioning your thread after you've threaded your needle, that is fine too, as long as you're able to hand sew adequately and properly. It doesn't really make a difference as to what your personal preference is. To condition your thread, take the beeswax. I'm going to take the end of my thread. I'm going to put my thumb over the thread and sandwich the thread between my thumb and the beeswax and pull the thread through. Then I'm going to condition the remainder of the thread by again sandwiching the thread between my thumb and the beeswax, and then I'm going to pull gently. You don't have to cut the thread the beeswax in half with the thread. Just want to gently pull this through until you get to the other end of the thread. Alright, now you might get a little chunk of beeswax like that. That's not a problem. Just take your fingers, pinch the thread between your fingers, and rub any chunks. You can kind of melt them away with the heat of your hands. Just sort of really massage that thread conditioner into the thread. Okay. Once you've done that, you are ready to thread your needle. Okay. Now, this is going to take practice. This is frequently something that is frustrating for novice stitchers. It is also not something that I'm able to do properly on the first pass either. If I have a needle that is very fine and the eye is very tiny, or I have thread that's a little bit thicker than the needle I should be using for it, it can be tricky to thread the needle. This is something that will take practice. Don't expect to get it on your first time. It's okay if you don't. I've been sewing since I was very young, and I still don't get it on my first time every time. It's not, just keep trying, and all you really need to do, okay, is take the end of your thread, and you're going to put it into that hole in the blunt end of the needle, okay, and you're going to pull, okay, I'm going to pull. So what I'm doing is the amount of thread is in half again. So just like when I cut it and I pulled the spool down, so I made sure that I doubled my thread, and make sure that those cut ends meet. My needle is in the middle of the thread, okay? And my two cut ends of the thread are together. Next, you want to knot your thread. There are different methods of knotting, and as long as you knot your thread and you're able to hand sew without the thread and the needle, the thread pulling through your fabric, it doesn't really make a difference how you thread or how you knot your thread. The way I do it is I take my thread, and you'll notice that I have both ends. I'm not tying them separately. I have both ends of the thread together. And take my two fingers and I wrap, actually between my two middle fingers, wrap the thread around like this, and then I pull the end through, and I roll the loop off my fingers, and then I pull this down, and you have a little knot. Now, typically I like to do that 2 or 3 times. Right in the same exact spot. Again, this is going to take practice. If this is a motion that your hands are unaccustomed to performing, it's going to take some time to be able to knot the thread and get it in the same spot every time. But you do normally need to do it probably at least twice. I usually like to do it 3 times, just because I like the number 3. Pull it nice and snug. You want the knot as close to the end of the thread as possible, okay? And that is how you prepare a hand sewing needle with thread, all-purpose thread, conditioned, all ready to go when you are hand sewing fabric.